I still remember the night we met as if it's etched in light. It was late spring, warm enough that the air felt soft against my skin. He held the door open with a quiet confidence and smiled like he already knew me. From that moment, everything unfolded like the beginning of a love story I had secretly hoped for but never believed I'd find. Our first dates were effortless. He noticed every detail: how I took my coffee, the music that made me close my eyes. There were flowers waiting on my doorstep after long days, unexpected texts that simply said "thinking of you." We walked through the city at night, the streets glowing gold, our conversations stretching until dawn. He listened as if every word I spoke mattered, as if my dreams were his own. Soon we were sharing plans, travels we'd take, a home filled with music and laughter. He said he felt safe with me and I felt the same. It seemed almost unreal. Someone so attentive, so certain, so ready to build a life together. Looking back now, I can hear the naive certainty in my own heart. I truly believed we were perfect, that what we had was unshakable. Any tiny doubts, any subtle warning signs, dissolved in the glow of what I thought was love. I didn't see the red flags waving quietly in the background. They were there from the very start, small, almost invisible, but I was too swept up in the romance to notice. Only later would I understand how clearly they had been trying to warn me. Red flag number 1 was subtle jealousy, though I didn't recognize it at first. It began so softly that it almost sounded like love. He'd say, "I just want to know where you are so I don't worry," or, "Text me when you get home so I know you're safe." It felt sweet, proof that he cared. But the requests multiplied. If I didn't answer quickly, he'd call again, his tone sharper than before. When I met friends after work, he'd ask who was there, how long I planned to stay, why I hadn't invited him. He framed it as concern, but there was always a hint of suspicion beneath the words. I remember one night when my phone died while I was out with an old college friend. By the time I came home, he was pacing the hallway, eyes hard. He said he'd been worried, but the interrogation that followed felt anything but loving. It was the first quiet sign that his care came with invisible chains. Looking back, that constant need to know where I was, and the unease I felt when I couldn't check in, wasn't affection. It was the opening move of control, dressed up as protection. That was red flag number 1, and I missed it. Red flag number 2 was love bombing. Though at the time it felt like the most beautiful romance I could imagine. From the very first week he swept me off my feet. Lavish bouquets arrived at my office, just because. Dinners at candlelit restaurants seemed to appear out of nowhere, followed by late-night drives where he whispered plans for the future. The house we'd buy, the children we'd raise, the trips we'd take together. It was intoxicating. He told me he had never felt this way before, that he was certain I was the one. Friends said it was too much, too fast, but I brushed off their worries. Who wouldn't want a love that felt so sure, so immediate? But beneath the fairy tale glow was a quiet trap. The gifts and grand gestures weren't just romance. They were a way to pull me in, to make me dependent on the rush of attention he controlled. If a day passed without a dramatic display, I felt uneasy, like I had somehow done something wrong. His affection became the oxygen of the relationship, and I didn't see that he was setting the rhythm, not me. Looking back, I can see how the whirlwind pace left no room for my own voice or boundaries. That intoxicating flood of affection wasn't pure love. It was the start of possession. That was red flag number 2, hidden behind a shower of roses. Red flag number 3 was isolation, and it crept in so quietly I barely noticed it happening. At first it sounded like devotion. He would say, "I just love our time together. No one else really gets us the way we do." When I mentioned meeting an old friend for coffee, he'd sigh and say, "They don't understand what we have. I hate how they influence you." It felt flattering, like we shared a secret world that only we could protect. Then came the subtle complaints. If I planned a weekend trip to see my family, he'd look disappointed and remind me how much he missed me when I was gone. When friends invited me out, he'd point out how they never liked him anyway, making it easier to decline the invitation. Slowly, without realizing it, my circle began to shrink. Calls from friends came less often because I always seemed unavailable. Family visits grew rare, until months passed without a single gathering. My world, once full of voices and laughter, narrowed to one person. Him. By the time I recognized the loneliness, it felt normal. That's the quiet power of isolation. It doesn't slam doors, it closes them inch by inch until you forget the room was ever larger. That was red flag number 3, the one that made sure all the others could thrive. Red flag number 4 was undermining my confidence, and it arrived disguised as harmless humor. It started with little jokes that everyone else might have brushed off. He'd laugh and say, "You're so naive sometimes," or tease, "Good thing you have me, how would you manage without?" At first I laughed too, thinking it was playful banter between partners. But those tiny jabs never stopped. They slipped into everyday moments, while I cooked, when I shared an idea for work, even when I tried something new. If I made a small mistake, he'd smile and shake his head as if I were a child. Over time the words settled in deeper than I wanted to admit. I found myself second-guessing decisions, hesitating before sharing thoughts, wondering if I really was as scatterbrained as he claimed. What hurt most was the way he delivered it. Light tone, a quick kiss on the forehead, as if nothing cruel had been said. That mixture of affection and insult made it difficult to call out. I kept telling myself it's just his sense of humor. I'm too sensitive. Looking back, I see how those harmless remarks chipped away at my self-esteem until I relied on his approval to feel capable. That was red flag number 4. The slow erosion of confidence that left me questioning my own worth. Red flag number 5 was shifting blame, and by the time I noticed, it had already become our normal. Every disagreement, big or small, somehow ended with me apologizing. If he forgot a promise, it was because I hadn't reminded him. If he raised his voice, it was because I pushed too hard. Even when he clearly broke his word, he could twist the conversation until I felt guilty for bringing it up. At first, I told myself I was being mature by smoothing things over. But soon I realized I was apologizing for things I hadn't done, just to keep the peace. I'd hear myself say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you," while a small voice inside whispered, "But you didn't do anything wrong." The pattern was exhausting. Every argument left me doubting my own memory and judgment, convinced I had somehow caused the tension. Over time, I stopped bringing up concerns altogether. It seemed safer to stay silent than to be blamed again. Now I can see it clearly. The constant turning of the tables, the way he avoided responsibility and left me holding the guilt. That relentless cycle of forced apologies was red flag number 5, proof that the relationship's balance of power was never equal. Red flag number 6 was gaslighting, the slow, deliberate twisting of reality until I doubted my own mind. It began with small denials. I'd mentioned something he had clearly said the day before, and he'd look at me with absolute certainty and reply, "That never happened. You must have imagined it." If I insisted, he'd sigh and say, "You're overreacting. You always twist things." At first I thought maybe I really had misheard. I started checking my messages, replaying conversations in my head, even writing down details so I wouldn't forget. But each time he calmly dismissed the evidence. He made me feel foolish for holding on to what I knew was true. Soon I stopped trusting my own memory. I'd catch myself hesitating before speaking, wondering if I'd somehow get it wrong again. Friends noticed I was quieter, less certain. Inside, I felt like I was disappearing, like my reality only existed if he allowed it. Looking back, that steady erosion of confidence in my own thoughts was devastating. It wasn't forgetfulness on my part. It was manipulation designed to keep me off balance. That was red flag number 6, the one that made me question my very sense of reality. Red flag number 7 was control wrapped in the language of love. He presented every restriction as a form of protection, and for a while I believed him. It started with what seemed like harmless suggestions. Maybe wear something less revealing, it's cold out and I just don't want people staring. Or, I can pick you up so you don't have to take the train, it's safer that way. Soon the requests became expectations. He wanted to know where I was shopping, how much I spent, which friends I planned to see. If I questioned it, he'd say, "I just worry about you. Isn't it my job to keep you safe?" I told myself it was sweet that he cared so much. But inside I began to feel the walls closing in. Every outfit, every outing, every purchase carried the silent question. Will this upset him? Looking back, I see how cleverly the control was disguised. It wasn't about safety or love, it was about power. That insistence on choosing my clothes, monitoring my spending, and deciding who I could meet was red flag number 7, hiding behind the comforting words, "I just want the best for you." Red flag number 8 was the fear of leaving, the quiet realization that I felt trapped in a life I no longer recognized. By then, his control had woven itself into every part of my days. My finances, my friendships, even my sense of safety. Whenever I imagined ending the relationship, a knot of panic tightened in my chest. I pictured his anger, the sharp words, the unpredictable moods. He never threatened me outright, but the memory of his sudden temper was enough to keep me still. I told myself, it's easier to stay calm to keep the peace, even as my own happiness slipped away. Money made the cage feel smaller. Because he handled most of our expenses, I worried I couldn't manage alone. He reminded me of that too, casually dropping lines like, "You'd struggle without me." Each comment carved a deeper groove of doubt. Looking back, I see how fear, of his reaction, of starting over, of surviving on my own, became the final lock on the door. That was red flag number 8, the point where love had turned into a prison, and leaving felt more dangerous than staying. When I look back now, I realize those 8 red flags didn't arrive in a neat order. They appeared quietly, sometimes overlapping, sometimes months apart, but always pointing to the same truth. What matters most is not when they show up. It's whether you listen to the feeling they create inside you. If something in your heart whispers that a relationship doesn't feel safe, trust that instinct. You don't need proof to honor your own sense of reality. Please remember, you are not alone. Reach out to someone you trust. A close friend, a family member, a counselor, or a support hotline. Help is there and you deserve it. These signs may seem small at first, but together they can build a cage. Your intuition is the key. Believe it and you can walk toward freedom.